These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. A German submarine crew poses on the deck beside a polar bear hauled aboard. 1943. On Arctic patrols, sailors sometimes stepped onto the ice for fresh meat and fur, turning a rare encounter into a chilling souvenir. Young members of the League of German Girls hold flags with the swastika emblem at a public rally in Germany, the 1930s. The group was the female branch of the state youth movement, mixing songs and sport with strict lessons in loyalty and obedience. Medical service dogs searched swamps, forests, and ravines for hurt soldiers, then guided medics to the exact spot while carrying bandages and medicine on their backs. In thick fog and deep mud, one quick pull on the lead could reveal someone hidden from every human eye. Pablo Escobar kicks off the opening of a football field he paid for in Medellin, 1982. The smiling ceremony shows how he used public gifts to win loyalty, while his real power stayed in the shadows. American dancer Isadora Duncan is seen riding in Nice on 14 September 1927, moments before her long scarf snagged in the rear wheel spokes. In a single second, the celebration turned into a legend of speed, fashion, and one tiny detail no one noticed. Stalingrad lies in ruins on the Volga River after the battle that ended in February 1943. The German Sixth Army surrendered there, and the destroyed city became a worldwide turning point. New Orleans, late 1940s, burlesque performer Kitty West, known as Evangeline the Oyster Girl, shatters a giant glass water tank during a live show. The Human Aquarium Act instantly becomes a flood on stage as the performer inside rushes for the opening and the crowd realizes it is real. A Japanese unit signals surrender to United States troops outside a ruined bunker area on the Pacific Front, 1945. Many island tunnel strongholds could hold out for weeks, so each walkout like this often marked the end of a hidden underground pocket. The first Rockefeller Center Christmas tree was put up in 1931 by construction workers during the building project in Midtown Manhattan. It was a simple tree with handmade garlands, years before the giant annual lighting turned it into a world symbol. Virginia, United States, 1956. A station attendant pumps fuel into a convertible while a steam locomotive roars past just a few feet behind. Back then, full-service stations were normal, and roadside life could feel like a movie set, with real trains as the backdrop. Bugatti Type 41, Royale, Coupe Napoleon, 1927, photographed with the family chauffeur beside one of the longest and most expensive road cars of its time. Its huge 12.7-liter straight-eight engine was built for royalty, yet only a handful were made. A 1926 photo of an underground smoke room where customers lie on stacked bunks and use long pipes. Places like this were often hidden behind ordinary doors, so the street could look normal, while this scene ran a few steps away. Bicycle polo at the London Olympic Games in 1908, with Ireland facing Germany on a grass stadium field. It was an official Olympic event only once, then vanished from the program and became a strange, lost sport snapshot. Zapad 81, 1981. Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact troops line up tanks and infantry in a mass formation drill. It was one of the largest exercises of the Cold War and was designed to show fast, large-scale coordination. Women soldiers from Russia's provisional government march in 1917, part of all female battalions formed during the Revolution and the First World War. The best-known unit was led by Maria Bochkareva and was meant to boost morale and pressure men to stay in the ranks. Russell E. Oakes models his problem-solving gadgets in 1955, including a wind-up spaghetti eater and wrist spikes. It was a publicity-style invention set, built to look clever and ridiculous at the same time. Physician Min-Chiu Lee helped achieve one of the first complete remissions with chemotherapy by tracking a blood marker to guide treatment. he was dismissed for that approach before the result was accepted, and it reshaped how doctors proved a treatment was working. A match factory worker is photographed with phossy jaw, a jaw injury linked to long exposure to white phosphorus used in 19th century matches. Exiles in chains at the Sakhalin Island penal colony in the Russian Empire, 1891. The island served as a remote punishment settlement, and men hauled heavy loads in wheelbarrows as part of daily labor. Weimar Germany, 1923. Price tags show bread at 50,000 marks and eggs at 40,000 as the currency collapses. People carried baskets of paper money for basic food, and prices could change between morning and afternoon. France, 1915. Factory workers packed thousands of metal pellets into field gun rounds on an assembly line during the First World War. This was mass production at speed, with each filled casing turning into a timed burst designed to spread pellets across a wide area. Texas, 1994. Debutantes in huge formal gowns ride to the ball in the back of a moving box truck. The tradition promised high society glamour, but the ride looked like cargo and made the contrast unforgettable. Adolf Hitler sits with Helga Goebbels, Joseph Goebbels' daughter and his godchild, by the Trave River in 1935. Such family scenes were used to project a calm, friendly image for the cameras. Eastern Front, 1917. A German soldier in a gas mask holds an Easter egg shaped from snow inside his trench. The handmade holiday prop shows how even sacred dates survived in the mud and wire under constant fear of gas. Soviet and German Democratic Republic soldiers compete to field strip and reassemble a Kalashnikov rifle during a Cold War training event. Speed contests like this were common in Warsaw Pact units, turning basic weapon handling into a timed sport. Los Angeles, 1952. Policewoman Florence Coberly prepares for an undercover operation to catch a serial attacker. Decoy outfits and hidden radio gear helped officers draw the suspect into contact, then move in fast. Joseph Stalin walks with Nikolai Yezhov, the Soviet security chief, near the Moscow-Volga Canal in 1937. After Yezhov was removed from power in 1939, censors often erased him from this exact image, turning it into a classic case of edited history. Ralph Madsen, billed as the tallest cowboy in Texas, poses with two women towering at about 2.28 meters. His stage outfit and public photos turned his height into a traveling attraction. New York City, 1914. A massive International Workers of the World rally packs the street, with straw boater hats filling the frame. The union, nicknamed the Wobblies, used loud open-air speeches to pull thousands of workers into one place at once. Baku, 1990. A family writes Russian on their gate to signal who lives there during street unrest. Such labels were a desperate way to avoid being singled out when order broke down. The 5,000th Boeing B-17, nicknamed 5 Grand, is shown in 1944 after factory workers covered it with their signatures. The extra markings reportedly cut its speed by about 10 kilometers per hour, yet it still flew 78 missions before being retired and cut up. The Jurassic Park film crew poses in 1993 with the full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex model used on set. It was a mix of giant animatronics and early computer effects that reset how big movies showed creatures. Masked members of the Ku Klux Klan stand at a rally in Los Angeles on 15 March 1980. The group used public marches and symbols to promote racial separation and spread fear, even far from the Deep South. Golden Gate Bridge under construction in San Francisco Bay, 1933, with the first towers rising above the water. The bridge opened in 1937, and its main span became the longest in the world at the time. New Zealand's improvised Bob Semple tank, built in 1940 on a tractor chassis and covered in corrugated steel. It was slow, lightly protected, never saw combat, and became famous as a desperate stopgap design. North Atlantic Treaty Organization aircrews painted Happy Easter on an air-delivered munition during the air campaign over Yugoslavia, 24 March 1999. The British Panjandrum is tested on a Devon beach in 1943, a giant wheel cart pushed by many small rockets. It was meant to break through coastal defenses, but it spun out of control in trials and was never used in combat. Paris, 1955. A curator displays multiple fake Mona Lisa paintings side by side for a forgery exhibition. The show highlighted how small changes in paint, varnish, and brushwork can fool buyers until experts compare them in one room. Adolf Hitler poses with a German Shepherd in 1933. The photo was part of a public image campaign that showed him as calm and ordinary while the regime tightened control. NK Army Base in central Vietnam, 1965. The 1st Cavalry Division lines up dozens of helicopters on the golf course landing strip. Photographed by Larry Burrows, the image captures how air mobility turned a remote valley into a moving battlefield. Kabul, 1955. 2 women in full veils wait beside a pony cart taxi on a city street. The scene captures daily transport before cars took over, with horse carts serving as public rides. Eugene Ely takes off from the deck of the USS Birmingham on 14 November 1910 in one of the first ship-based airplane launches. The short wooden platform proved that aircraft could operate from warships and pushed navies toward true aircraft carriers. In 1923, Germany, hyperinflation got so extreme that a man posed in a coat covered with coins for a poster titled "The King of Inflation." The caption lists 43,000 Reichsmarks in coins, a huge total that still had little buying power. In August 1963, the Horace Baker family moved into Delmar Village in Fulcroft, Pennsylvania, during the Civil Rights era. Neighbors gathered and shouted, and the family needed round-the-clock police presence. A Los Angeles Police Department detective posed in a rubber disguise linked to Baxter Shorter's circle, recreating the unsettling look witnesses described. The mask was found at his sister's home and became a rare physical clue in the 1953 death investigation of Mabel Monahan. During the First World War, Germany tested a giant crew-served flame projector built around a large pressurized tank and a long hose. Its heavy weight and brittle fittings made it prone to sudden failure from small jolts, turning a dramatic machine into a liability on the battlefield. Narva, 1944. A soldier shows a helmet with a clean puncture mark where a fast projectile skimmed the metal instead of his head. That tiny change in angle turned a split-second impact into a photo that feels like a final warning. Westminster students walked to a civil defense exam in 1938, dressed for the street, but carrying gas masks and gear like ordinary school supplies. The calm faces beside that mask show how Britain tried to make air raid readiness feel normal before war arrived. Madrid, early 1936. People drop low and sprint across tram tracks as tension spikes during a street protest before the February 16th elections. That vote brought the Popular Front, called the Frente Popular, to power. May 1944. A Polish Home Army unit poses in the woods near Antowil, in occupied Poland, weapons ready, but faces steady for the camera. These underground fighters relied on forests as cover and on local networks for food, messages, and sudden strikes before disappearing again. Spain, 1936. Republican defenders crouch behind mattresses and doorway cover, turning a quiet village street into a sudden front line. The stacked bedding was a real field trick to slow fragments and keep low while aiming down the road. Berlin, April 1939. Engineer Ferdinand Porsche demonstrates a small car model to Germany's ruler during a tightly staged state birthday event. The people's car idea, shown here later, fed into the design lineage that became the Volkswagen Beetle. In 1939, George Deatherage testified before Congress after accusations that his group was preparing a coordinated plan to take control across the United States after the 1940 election. Even though few people remember it today, investigators later described it as one of the most detailed extremist schemes of the era. Australian troops come ashore at Balikpapan in April 1945, stepping from landing craft onto a beach, dark with smoke and wrecked palms. This assault was aimed at securing the port and nearby oil facilities, one of the last major amphibious landings of the Pacific War. In 1944, B-24 Liberators of the 446th Bomb Group fly in formation as dark shapes fall toward targets far below. This aircraft could carry a heavy load over long range, making it a key workhorse of the 8th Air Force's daylight raids. In 1944, the United States Army Criminal Investigation Division photographed confiscated military equipment linked to the Lane Group after Private Werner Schmiedel, and several members were arrested in Italy. Cortland, New York during the blizzard of 1978. A bulldozer cuts a trench through snowdrifts so tall they swallow fences and power poles. This storm piled snow into wind-carved walls that made roads vanish and forced crews to dig routes back into the town. Berlin, 1961. Border troops rip up paving stones and cut a trench as the first barrier rises, turning a normal street into a border. It began overnight on August 13th and grew into a 155-kilometer system of concrete and fences that sealed East Berlin from the west until 1989. On the outskirts of Saigon in 1971, a helicopter crewman leans out to provide close air support during an airborne landing. The bright flash at the barrel shows how crews tried to keep the landing zone clear while flying low over open fields. United States, 1975. George Lucas stands beside an early R2-D2 prototype, still rough, heavy, and built like a workshop machine. This little droid soon became one of cinema's most recognizable designs, created from simple parts, paint, and clever filming tricks. Britain, the 1930s. A military motorcyclist launches off a ramp and clears a row of comrades lying flat, turning training into a fearless stunt. These riders practiced dispatch and scouting skills at speed because a motorcycle could carry urgent messages faster than any truck on muddy roads. In 1977, the Sex Pistols sat for plain visa photos for a planned United States trip, trying to fit punk chaos into official paperwork. A few days later, the American shows collapsed into bans and cancellations, making these calm portraits feel like the last quiet frame. Chelyabinsk, 1996. A free giveaway of a new bread sample draws a crush of hands at a truck window, each person reaching for a small piece. The photo captures how even basic food promotions could turn into a tense crowd scene during Russia's hard economic years. Belfast, 1972. Children with a toy water squirter tease a British Army patrol standing in protective gear during the Troubles. That tiny splash against helmets became a famous image of how tension and normal childhood collided on the same block. Sydney, 1900. Professional rat catchers pose with cages and buckets during the city's bubonic plague scare, showing how public health was fought on the ground. Rats were collected for checks because infected fleas could spread the illness, turning pest control into frontline disease tracking. A senior German propaganda official is shown outside a church, and the story often linked to this image is that his marriage to a divorced Protestant put him outside Catholic rules. Researchers still debate whether there was any formal expulsion. Madrid, around 1936. A whole street is reduced to a jagged field of brick and plaster with balconies hanging over empty air. The Spanish Civil War turned dense city blocks into open craters, and this view shows how fast a normal neighborhood could vanish. Austria, 1967. A young Arnold Schwarzenegger stands with his older brother Meinhard, already built from years of hard gym training. That same year, Arnold won the Mr. Universe Amateur title at age 20, the win that opened the door to his global career. Near Brest in September 1939, a Soviet tank crewman speaks with German troops beside an armored vehicle during the brief moment when the two forces coordinated after Poland's defeat. Scenes like this hint at the secret deal that divided territory between them. Outside the Cushman Motor Works plant in Nebraska in 1945, riders cruise past the factory on compact Cushman scooters built for simple, low-cost travel. The same brand also made the Cushman airborne scooter used by United States paratroopers, proving this tiny machine had a surprisingly serious side. North Sea, 1918. A German seaplane crew photographs British submarine C-25 near Harwich as white splash rings spread across the water around it. It is a rare view of early aircraft spotting submarines from above. March 7, 1947. A camera on a V-2 research rocket captured one of the first views of Earth from space at about 162 kilometers up. The photo reveals the planet's curve and a thin haze of air, and the film was later recovered from the returned camera canister. Australia, 1969. A model poses beside a Save the Mini sign from the Daily Mirror, showing how a simple skirt became a national debate. The mini skirt spread worldwide in the 1960s, and by the end of the decade, it stood for youth style, new freedom, and fast-changing social rules. Mid-19th century Egypt. Workers uncover the colossal face of Pharaoh Ramesses II, with a man sitting on the headdress to prove the size. Early cameras needed long exposures, so photos like this became some of the first true records of ancient monuments returning from centuries under sand. Off Cherbourg in 1944, Allied ships fire anti-aircraft guns at night, and the camera turns each burst into bright streaks across the sky. That glowing web shows how crews tried to build a moving wall of fire to protect the harbor and landing supply routes. In 1991, Martin Scorsese tested tattoo designs on Robert De Niro by writing and sketching directly on his body to plan the look for Cape Fear. The markings were a roadmap for the final makeup work, built to shape a character you recognize before he even speaks. Paris, July 10, 1960. The Soviet team walks off with the first European Championship trophy, the start of what later became the UEFA Euro. They won the final 2-1 after extra time against Yugoslavia, sealing the title with a late header. In 1920, 19-year-old Walt Disney took a job as a commercial artist at a Kansas City film advertising studio, where he began making short, animated ads. Those simple paid reels taught him timing and camera tricks that later shaped his first major cartoon projects. Orléans, 1970. A French aerotrain prototype glides along its test track, riding on an air cushion instead of steel wheels. It could reach very high speeds with jet thrust, but the project was dropped when France chose conventional high-speed rail that became the TGV. John Snow was a 19th-century English doctor who traced a cholera outbreak to one public water pump by mapping cases street by street. His evidence pushed medicine toward clean water and sanitation, even while many experts still blamed bad air instead of germs. Moscow, 1989. People rush into TSM as new arrivals are announced, turning a department store entrance into a sprint. In the late Soviet years, rare goods could appear without warning, so a single sign could trigger a citywide race. In 1941, American actress Anne Sheridan signs autographs for British sailors while sitting on a shipboard gun mount during a morale-boosting visit. Images like this were carefully staged to link Hollywood glamour with wartime service and keep spirits high far from home. United States, 1942. A sailor lifts a woman into a dramatic farewell kiss as a train pulls away, with passengers smiling from the windows. Wartime departures turned stations into sudden movie scenes because nobody knew when the next goodbye would be the last. Abu Dhabi, 1975. Wooden dhows sit in a shallow lagoon, showing how fishing and pearl diving shaped the city before glass towers. Only 4 years after the United Arab Emirates formed in 1971, oil money was already transforming a coastline that still looked like a quiet desert port. Frank Lentini was born with 3 legs because of a rare condition where a partly formed twin remained attached during development. He learned to walk, run, and even kick a ball with the extra limb, then turned his unusual anatomy into a famous stage career. Chicago, 1900. Students pack Rush Medical College's amphitheater as a live bedside lecture unfolds in the center under bright lights. This clinical theater style trained doctors by watching real patients up close. This mugshot shows Pretty Boy Floyd, a notorious American bank robber from the early 1930s who became one of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's first celebrity targets. During the Great Depression, he was mythologized by some as a folk hero and hunted by others as a symbol of crime in hard times. Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali pose like they are about to spar, mixing rock star style with champion focus in one surreal moment. Their meeting became an instant symbol of two different kinds of fame colliding in the same room. Early 20th century France. A rural mail carrier delivers letters while standing on tall stilts to glide over mud and flooded paths. In the marshy Landes region, postmen used stilts for kilometers at a time, turning everyday delivery into a skill that looked almost unreal. Berlin, German Democratic Republic, January 18, 1963. Nikita Khrushchev smiles as factory workers present him with a giant teddy bear at a staged public event. The plush gift was soft propaganda, meant to show friendly ties. United States, 1930. A couple holds an underwater wedding while wearing bulky metal diving helmets like walking lanterns. Early diving gear relied on air pumped from the surface, so even a romantic ceremony needed hoses, attendants, and perfect timing. 1945. Soviet and American soldiers celebrate together after meeting at the end of the war in Europe, turning a crowded table into a moment of relief. The photo captures the rare instant when two future rivals acted like friends, united by one shared finish line. Stalingrad, early 1943. Soldiers move through a frozen wasteland of shattered buildings after months of brutal street fighting. The battle left the city almost unrecognizable, and its outcome marked a major turning point on the Eastern Front. London, 1936. Travelers crowd around a television set at Waterloo Station to watch one of Britain's first broadcasts. Because early TVs were too expensive for most homes, a train ticket could double as an entry pass to the future in the waiting room. Belfast, the 1910s. The Titanic takes shape at Harland and Wolff's Queen's Island Yard, a steel city rising inside the giant slipway. Its hull was assembled from massive plates held by millions of rivets, built for speed and luxury on the Atlantic. Poland, 1967. The Rolling Stones perform at the Congress Hall of the Palace of Culture and Science, and the crowd packs every seat to see a Western rock band live. In a tightly controlled era, this concert felt like a crack in the wall, which is why the energy in the hall looks almost explosive. Moscow, the Kremlin, 1963. Nikita Khrushchev jokes with Fidel Castro by showing off a new gas mask model, turning serious equipment into a photo op. The smiles say a lot about Cold War theater, where even protective gear could be used to signal alliance and confidence. Soviet Union, 1933. A collective farm worker holds his grain pay for Labor Days, with the sacks marked by year and weight like a grim receipt. Under the Labor Day system, people often earned in grain instead of money, so 2 years of work could be counted in a few heavy bags. In 1994, a 19-year-old Curtis Jackson is photographed in a New York State Department of Correctional Services booking image, long before the name 50 Cent became worldwide. The contrast is The Hook, a future hitmaker starting from the system's harsh paperwork, then later turning street stories into chart history. 1933. Police measure actress Peggy Graves' swimsuit on a beach to check if it meets local minimum coverage rules. It looks absurd now, but many cities treated swimwear like public order, literally using rulers to define decency. London after the air raid of December 29, 1940. Smoke blankets the skyline as whole blocks burn and roofs collapse into jagged shells. That night became known as the Second Great Fire of London because so many fires started at once that the city glowed for miles. 1982. Steven Spielberg poses on the set of E.T. with the creature wrapped like a bundled passenger in a bike basket. That simple bike became the film's most iconic image, made with clever angles, lighting, and practical effects instead of computer graphics. 1992. Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson pose on a basketball set, blending sports dominance with pop superstardom in one frame. It was shot for the Jam music video, where Jordan appears alongside Jackson in a slick mix of dance and hoops. This is not a real wartime photo, but a frame from the mixed-media short Project Bear, where director Pascal Fleurx tells his grandfather's veteran story using a bear in his place. The film screened at festivals in Germany and Romania in 2015, turning a strange image into a personal memory device. Moscow, 1993. A schoolboy carries a Soviet flag toward a line of helmeted police, even though the Soviet Union had officially ended 2 years earlier. The stones scattered across the street show how protests in that year could change from chanting to chaos in minutes. United States, 1960. Leo Fender, the inventor behind Fender guitars and the Stratocaster shape, is pictured at his workbench with parts and tools. The twist is that he was an electronics builder who could not play guitar well, yet he designed instruments that defined the sound of modern music. On August 1, 1861, the Times in London printed one of the first published weather forecasts, organized by Royal Navy officer Robert Fitzroy. He used barometer readings and telegraphed reports to warn ships of approaching storms. Copenhagen, 1952. American fighter aircraft were towed through city streets to reach the airport, with wings nearly brushing buildings and tram lines. For a few surreal minutes, pedestrians watched military planes roll past shops like traffic, a Cold War scene that looks impossible today. An Australian beach about a century ago. Crowds wade in heavy, modest outfits and wide hats, treating the shoreline like a public parade. Before modern swimwear and sunscreen culture, many people bathed fully covered and stayed close to the shallows, turning a swim into a careful ritual. February 1945. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill steps down from an aircraft after arriving for the Yalta Conference. Within days, the Big Three would debate post-war borders and the shape of Europe. Soviet Union, 1947. Ivan Burilov wrote the word comedy on his ballot, and the state treated that small act as a serious offense. Novokuznetsk, Soviet Union, 1980. A soot-covered hatchman sits after a shift, his face and clothes stained by coal dust. Hatchmen handled heavy covers and loading gear around rail cars and industrial pits, working in grime and cold for hours at a time. Soviet Union, 1961. American tourists ride in a bus marked Associates USA with a United States flag taped inside the window. During the Cold War, such group tours ran on fixed routes with official guides and pre-approved stops. Petrograd, 1923. Residents gather outside a shop, raising bottles to celebrate the end of the long alcohol ban. Russia's wartime prohibition began in 1914 and survived the revolution, fueling a huge black market until legal sales returned in the 1920s. Moscow, 1941. An airplane cockpit photo looks down on Dynamo Stadium during a football match, with the stands packed around the running track. Within months, sport in the city was disrupted by the German invasion, and the stadium would be used for wartime needs as well as games. Manchester, England, 1965. The Beatles pose in playful anti-smog masks before a concert, a joke that still points to a real urban air problem. Britain passed the Clean Air Act in 1956 after the 1952 London smog disaster, but smoky city air was still common through the 1960s. 20th century dentistry used a metal mouthgag like this to hold the jaw open during long procedures. Before modern numbing methods and smaller tools, rigid clamps and straps were common for keeping a patient still and giving the dentist access. Yerevan, the 1990s. Bus Route 25 leans hard as riders cling to the outside because the cabin is already full. Overcrowded public transport became common in the post-Soviet crash, when old fleets ran past their limits and demand never dropped. In 1946, Kim Il-sung appears as the new chairman of North Korea's Provisional People's Committee, backed by the Soviet occupation authorities after Japan's surrender. That year, his government carried out land reform and nationalized major industries. Moscow State University, 1984. A student writes tiny exam notes on her legs and hides them under a skirt. Exam rooms check pockets and paper, so some students use skin as a hidden backup. Fort Jackson, 1942. Winston Churchill uses a portable radio during a visit to United States Army training grounds. The bulky walkie-talkie style sets of the period ran on batteries and let commanders talk over short distances without phone lines. This photo is often shared online as a teenage Norma Jean Mortensen, the future Marilyn Monroe, long before the famous studio look. Born in 1926, she grew up moving between foster homes and later signed her first modeling contract in 1945. Penicia, Portugal, the 1950s. A fisherwoman hauls anchors and lines to help pull fishing boats onto the beach after landing the catch. Coastal fishing here often depended on family labor, and Peniche became one of Portugal's major ports for sardines and other Atlantic fish. Ramallah, Palestine, 1890. Women carry large water jars on their heads, a daily job before household plumbing. A full jar could weigh over 20 kilograms, so the head ring helped spread the load and keep balance. Masabumi Hosono was a Japanese passenger who survived the RMS Titanic disaster in 1912. Back in Japan, newspapers criticized him for returning alive when many others did not. Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova samples space food during training in 1963. Early space meals were often packed in squeeze tubes so they could be eaten in zero gravity. A Cuban leader talks with a U.S. civil rights activist during a visit in New York City in 1960. The meeting took place during United Nations Week and was widely photographed. In 19th century Britain, coal mines hired children as young as 9 as nippers to open and close heavy air doors in narrow tunnels. The job helped control airflow and gas buildup, but long shifts, dim light, and moving carts made it one of the most dangerous roles underground. A lab technician watches a couple kiss during a lipstick transfer test. Cosmetics labs used kiss tests like this to measure smudge and durability before modern instrument-based testing. George Hackenschmidt, 1877-1968, was an Estonian-born strongman and professional wrestler, and the hack squat is named after him. The bench press has no single confirmed inventor, and it developed gradually from early weight training methods. Selma Burke was an American sculptor who made a bronze bas-relief of Franklin D. Roosevelt after a White House sitting. The Roosevelt dime is officially credited to John R. Sinek, but Burke said her relief influenced the final design. Early portrait photos like daguerreotypes were being made in the 1840s, so an elderly public figure could be photographed. This picture is widely shared as Andrew Jackson, but the identification is not certain. Ottoman aviator Ahmet Ali Çelik'ten poses in flight gear beside his aircraft in the early 20th century. He qualified as a military pilot in 1916 and is often cited as one of the earliest pilots of African descent. A worker dismantles the Statue of Liberty's original torch during the major renovation in the 1980s, with the Twin Towers visible across New York Harbor. The torch was replaced with a new one, and the original was kept for museum display. A studio portrait of a woman from Biskra, Algeria, wearing layered jewelry and a veil, photographed in 1870. Biskra was an oasis town at the edge of the Sahara, and its local clothing was often recorded by 19th century photographers. The Giza pyramids sit on the desert edge beside the city of Giza, part of Greater Cairo. Modern neighborhoods and roads now run right up to the plateau. A black and white photo shows a formal costume party with a man in a tuxedo and a woman in a long dress wearing a stag headpiece. The attached caption dates it to 1972 and links it to the Rothschild family. This photo shows a men's shoe with an unusually high heel and a buckle, a style linked to European fashion in the 18th century. Heeled footwear was worn by elite men in parts of Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. A Western Union bicycle messenger stands on a wet New York City street in 1896. Telegraph companies used bicycle couriers to rush written messages and money transfers between offices and customers. Riders gather at the finish of the first Tour de France in 1903. The inaugural race was run in multiple long stages and helped popularize road cycling in France. A studio portrait shows a young man in formal clothes posing with ectrodactyly, a congenital hand difference where some fingers are missing or fused. The image is dated to the early 20th century and uses classic painted backdrop studio staging. In 1933, a woman uses a clamp-like salon tool to press initials into a hair bun. Lettered hairstyles and monograms were a brief personalization trend in the early 1930s. A damaged mud brick house complex in Kabul, Afghanistan, is shown with exposed roof beams and broken plaster walls. The thick adobe-style walls and timber roof frame are typical materials used in many traditional homes in the region. Men load wicker baskets filled with paper banknotes onto a truck in Germany during the hyperinflation of 1923. The currency's value fell so fast that everyday payments could require large bundles carried in containers. A United States medic with a Red Cross armband treats an injured German soldier by a roadside in France during World War II. The photo shows emergency care being given regardless of uniform. This is a real Schule-Linz class photo from 1903, with arrows labeling two students as later famous public figures. Their time at the school overlapped in 1903-1904, but the identification in this low-quality copy is not verified. In December 1941, the Japanese American Citizens League opened this anti-Axis committee office to prove loyalty when public fear turned on their community. It opened on December 14, 1941, and ran volunteer and fundraising drives for the United States. Here is Harry S. Truman as a young artillery captain in World War I, long before he became the 33rd President of the United States. In France, he led Battery D of the 129th Field Artillery and trained it on the fast French 75mm field cannon. Packed into a train doorway in 1945, Soviet soldiers clutch bouquets and medals as they finally reach home. Many returns happened in slow waves, and millions stayed in uniform until 1948. A Diné, Navajo, mother holds her child while another stays close, wrapped in a bold geometric blanket that mirrors classic rug patterns. Navajo weaving grew after Spanish sheep arrived in the 1600s, and many designs still carry family identity across generations. German Red Cross nurses in a World War I ward calm a young soldier while noting his care on paper. The Red Cross emblem was recognized under the First Geneva Convention in 1864, and by 1914 it signaled protected medical help across Europe. In August 1939 at Khalkhin Gol, a Mongolian cavalryman escorts a line of disarmed Japanese troops across a floating bridge. The clash helped push Japan to avoid a northern front, and it led to the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact in 1941. These are Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer screen tests of Judy Garland trying braids, bows, and Dorothy's gingham dress for The Wizard of Oz in 1939. The studio tested many looks before choosing the simple pigtails, and the blue dress later became one of Hollywood's most searched-for museum items. Soviet soldiers walked through Bucharest in 1945, wearing the rounded SH-40 helmet that became a Red Army trademark. Romania switched sides on August 23, 1944, and by December 1947, King Michael abdicated as a communist government took power. On Nissan Island in the Green Islands, local residents gathered to study a New Zealand tracked vehicle under coconut palms during the Second World War. New Zealand forces built airfields here in 1944, turning this tiny island group into a key link for aircraft moving across the Pacific. 2 Royal Canadian Naval Service trainees grin in heavy oilskin gear at a naval damage control school in 1944. Women in the service trained with pumps and hose drills to handle ship emergencies at sea. A warm greeting in 1937 captures how Arctic flights became a huge Soviet headline. The pilot shown was celebrated for the Chelyuskin rescue in 1934, and that same year, the first drifting station, North Pole 1, began its long ice journey. 2 disabled civilians limp along a cobbled road near Dresden in 1946, showing how survival often turned into a long recovery. After the war, Germany had millions of injured people, and prosthetic workshops became one of the busiest new industries. Kenya's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, sits in full ceremonial dress in 1970, holding a staff and fly whisk used in public rituals. He guided Kenya to independence in 1963 and became president when the republic was declared in 1964. In 1958, Alaskans celebrated the Alaska Statehood Act by parading a moose with a cheeky sign through town. Alaska officially became the 49th state on January 3, 1959. On January 17, 1912, Robert Falcon Scott and 4 teammates reached the South Pole and found Roald Amundson's tent and a note waiting for them. They still hauled heavy Antarctic rock samples on the way back, and their last camp was found only 11 miles from a supply depot. A former Mike Force volunteer in Cambodia in 1970 poses with a guitar on a shattered street, turning a tense moment into a strange photo. Mike Force meant Mobile Strike Force Command, and many Khmer Krom members later served the Khmer Republic after the 1970 change of power. This 1924 Australian police photo shows Sidney Skookerman posed twice, close-up and full-length, with his case number written on the wall. He was held after allegedly getting warehouse goods by claiming he ran a business, a classic paper trail scam from the pre-digital era. A young Christian Bedouin couple poses as newlyweds in the early 1900s, blending desert clothing with a prominent cross and heavy silver jewelry. Many Bedouin women wore layered coins and amulets as portable savings, so a wedding outfit could also display a family's wealth. In 1945, Netherlands accused collaborators were marched through the street as their hair was cut to mark them out in public. The women were nicknamed Moffenmeiden, and the haircut became a fast way to label and punish them without a trial. On January 21, 1945, 3 men of Company E, 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division pause for a meal in the snow near Bettendorf, Luxembourg. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton pose in Tenafly, New Jersey in 1881 after decades of building the United States women's rights movement. The vote came with the 19th Amendment in 1920, 14 years after Anthony died and 18 years after Stanton died. A tiny cat rides on a soldier's helmet, like a living mood check in a tough job. During World War I and later on submarines, cats were kept because their sharp senses could react early when the air turned bad. In Houston in 1941, pet owners took a hands-on first aid class, practicing gentle checks on a calm dog. This kind of training grew as city pet numbers rose, and early animal care lessons helped push modern emergency vet services. Backstage at the Moulin Rouge in Paris in 1924, dancers relax in the dressing room before the high kick can-can. The venue became famous for bold choreography and bright electric lighting that turned it into a worldwide symbol of city entertainment. In December 1928, zookeeper John Wilkie leans in as a small monkey sits beside a toy friend, looking strangely human in that quiet moment. Primates copy what they see fast, so caretakers often used simple objects and companions to shape calmer behavior. A Red Army soldier stares straight into the lens at a Moscow parade in 1940, wearing the SS-39 helmet with its bold star badge. These Red Square parades were filmed and shared nationwide, turning one anonymous face into a symbol of a whole country on the eve of 1941. French soldiers ride on armored vehicles toward Strasbourg in 1944, passing a road sign that says it is only 4 kilometers away. Strasbourg had been annexed by Germany in 1940, so its liberation became a powerful symbol of France returning to its own borders. In 1989, a rising supermodel stands calm in a bold fashion look while photographers crowd in for the shot. That year, the supermodel era exploded, turning runway faces into global celebrities overnight. This cat was later nicknamed Unsinkable Sam after moving from the battleship Bismarck to HMS Cossack and then to HMS Ark Royal during the Second World War. Each ship was lost at sea, so Sam was finally kept on shore and reportedly lived until 1955. On the set of Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992, Francis Ford Coppola checks a page while Gary Oldman sits in full transformation makeup. Coppola pushed old school in camera tricks like miniatures, shadow play, and double exposure instead of modern computer effects. Tehran, March 1979. Iranian women filled the streets to oppose the new demand that headscarves be worn in workplaces. The rallies around International Women's Day became one of the first public tests of how the revolution would shape everyday life. In Moscow in 1953, mourners sit in stunned silence after Joseph Stalin's passing, clutching newspapers printed with his portrait. Within days, a fierce leadership struggle began, setting the stage for Nikita Khrushchev's rise and a very different Soviet era. This is Eugen Sandow in the 1910s, the showman whose classical physique helped invent modern bodybuilding. In 1901, he ran the first major bodybuilding contest in London, and the Sandow Trophy is still the top prize at Mr. Olympia. In South Korea in 1952, North Korean detainees dance a quadrille in a camp with a handmade Statue of Liberty behind them. The Liberty prop was a deliberate symbol, turning a simple dance into a political message about freedom. In 1948, wrestler Adrian Nichols posed for press photos showing that a skilled woman could outwork bigger opponents with pure technique. Publicity shots like this helped push women's wrestling from side act to real ticket seller in post-war arenas. A quiet North French street in 1967 with brick workers' rows and pollarded trees forming a long tunnel of winter branches. The muddy road hints at coal and factory towns where homes were built close to the job, and a child's bicycle was often the real freedom pass. Winter, 1917 to 1918. Vladimir Lenin stands with Bolshevik leaders just as the new Soviet government was taking control of Russia. Within months, they shut down the Constituent Assembly and signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918, reshaping Europe's map overnight.